Welcome to this explainer. Today we're peeling back the layers of Hollywood myth to look at the actual historical records of one of the absolute most fascinating figures in human history. We're talking about a ruler whose life was literally packed with intense love, high-stakes power plays, and incredible danger.
Which brings us to a really fun core question. Was history's most famous queen known for her beauty or her brain? Okay, let's dive into this. For over 2,000 years, the popular stories surrounding Cleopatra have heavily focused on her looks. But when we actually look at the historical sources, a completely different picture emerges. We're talking about a brilliant, highly educated strategist who used her mind as her absolute greatest weapon.
Section 1. A queen of many languages. To really understand her early life, we've got to rewind to 69 BC in Alexandria. This was a magnificent, wealthy metropolis. It boasted massive buildings, brilliant scientists, and libraries absolutely packed with the world's knowledge. Now here is a wild fact. Despite ruling Egypt, Cleopatra's family was actually Greek. Her father was King Ptolemy XII, and her family line had come to Egypt centuries earlier. They managed to maintain their grip on power, ruling the country for almost 300 years. It was a seriously long-established dynasty, but man, it was steeped in intense internal rivalries. We're talking brothers and sisters constantly fighting each other for total control.
So how exactly did she stand out in this fierce, backstabbing family? Well, through a unique devotion to learning. Cleopatra studied science, mathematics, philosophy, and music. She spent literally countless hours reading in the Great Library of Alexandria. But here is the absolute most crucial detail. While her family naturally spoke Greek, they had never even bothered to learn the local language. Cleopatra was different. Actually, she was totally unique here. She went out of her way to learn to read, write, and speak Egyptian because she wanted to truly connect with and lead her people. Many considered her the smartest person in all of Egypt.
But, intelligence alone couldn't fix the massive political problem she was about to face. At just 18 years old, in the year 51 BC, her father died. She inherited a kingdom that was incredibly rich, but militarily weak, especially compared to the growing, terrifying shadow of Rome right next door. To make matters even more complicated, tradition forced her to share the throne as co-ruler with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. Think about that. An 18-year-old brilliant woman forced to share power with a literal child. And let me tell you, she certainly wasn't about to just sit back and let his advisors run the whole shebang.
Section 2. Enter Julius Caesar. Because Cleopatra took charge, her brother's threatened advisors actually forced her to flee Egypt. Exiled in Syria at age 21, she didn't just give up. No way! She immediately began building her own army.
While she was out there plotting her return, the immensely powerful Roman general Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria. Cleopatra knew she desperately needed him on her side, but her brother's guards completely controlled the city. So, to bypass her enemies, she came up with this truly audacious plan. She took a small boat to the palace at dead of night, had herself rolled up inside a large carpet, and literally had a man carry her right past the heavily armed guards as a quote-unquote gift for Caesar. Once inside his room, the carpet was unrolled, and out stepped the 21-year-old queen to meet the 52-year-old Roman general. Talk about an entrance.
Obviously, Caesar was absolutely stunned by this daring move. But the real clincher wasn't the magic trick with the carpet. It was her mind. She immediately began speaking to Caesar in fluent Latin. She intelligently analyzed Egyptian politics right then and there, explaining exactly why her brother's advisors were terrible for both Egypt and Rome.
Well, Caesar was convinced, but Ptolemy's advisors outright refused his demands, which sparked a super dangerous war right there in the capital. They attacked the royal palace, trapping Caesar and Cleopatra inside with just a tiny Roman force. This terrifying siege lasted for months. Tragically, during the fighting, ships in the harbor were set ablaze, and the fire spread like wildfire, destroying many priceless books in the Great Library. Eventually, though, Roman reinforcements arrived, Ptolemy's army was completely defeated, the young king drowned trying to escape, and Cleopatra safely regained her throne.
Following the war, Cleopatra and Caesar's alliance deepened. They traveled the Nile together, discussed history and science, and she even gave birth to his son, named Caesarion, which literally means Little Caesar. She even traveled to Rome to stay in his villa, demanding respect. But then, the unthinkable happened. In 44 BC, Roman senators, terrified that Caesar wanted to be a king, brutally assassinated him. Cleopatra was suddenly totally vulnerable in a hostile city. She grabbed her son and fled right back to Egypt. Which leaves us with this massive cliffhanger. With Caesar gone, what happens to Egypt?
Section 3. The Alliance with Antony. Following Caesar's murder, Rome plunged into a vicious civil war. The victors eventually divided the Roman world right down the middle. A man named Octavian took control of the West, and a powerful general named Mark Antony took control of the East.
Now, Mark Antony needed massive amounts of money to fund his armies, and Egypt was the wealthiest nation around, so he summoned Cleopatra. She arrived on a magnificent ship with purple sails and silver oars, completely captivating him. And this brilliantly illustrates the underlying reality of these partnerships. They were deeply calculated, mutually beneficial political and financial alliances. Look, with Caesar, she needed Roman military protection to secure her throne. With Mark Antony, the need for protection was still there, but Antony desperately needed Egypt's vast wealth. Both alliances secured her nation's safety, and both resulted in children. 1 with Caesar and 3 with Antony.
Section 4. The Fall of Egypt. Octavian, sitting back in Rome, saw an opportunity to consolidate total power. He launched a massive, relentless propaganda campaign against Mark Antony. He basically told the Roman people that Antony had forgotten his homeland and was being completely manipulated by a dangerous foreign queen who wanted to control Rome itself.
This propaganda worked perfectly, and the Roman people fully turned against them. Let's just trace this rapid collapse for a second. We started in 51 BC when she inherited the throne. We navigated the crisis of 44 BC with Caesar's murder, but the true turning point is right here in 31 BC at the Battle of Actium. This was a massive naval clash where the combined fleets of Antony and Cleopatra faced Octavian. The battle turned against them, forcing Cleopatra and Antony to retreat with their remaining ships back to Egypt. Antony's left-behind fleet surrendered, and just 1 year later, in 30 BC, Octavian's unstoppable army arrived on Egyptian shores.
The finale here is incredibly tragic. During a final, desperate skirmish, Mark Antony heard a false rumor that Cleopatra was already dead. Overcome with devastating grief, he took his own life with his sword, only to be brought to Cleopatra to die in her arms. Now Cleopatra was truly alone, a prisoner of a polite but totally unyielding Octavian. She knew exactly what his plan was. He would take her back to Rome and parade her through the streets as a defeated prize. She absolutely refused to accept that public shame. So, on August 12, 30 BC, Cleopatra chose her own ending. Some say by a snakebite, others say by poison, but she ensured she went out on her own terms.
The historical weight of this moment is just staggering. Cleopatra died at just 39 years old, and with her last breath, Egypt's incredibly long history as an independent nation was completely extinguished. The country was absorbed as a mere territory of the Roman Empire. Cleopatra was forever marked in history as the very last pharaoh of Egypt.
Section 5. Intelligence is true power. So why do we still talk about her over 2,000 years later? Because she was a woman navigating an incredibly dangerous world dominated by ruthless, powerful men. And she didn't survive by just sitting pretty on a throne. She survived by leveraging her immense intellect, her highly strategic mind, and her unyielding bravery.
The historical record is absolutely clear. She did not just use beauty. She used her mind. History often judges her ambition and her pursuit of power, sure, but her ultimate weapon to protect her country wasn't a magic trick or simply charm. It was her deep, comprehensive education in science, philosophy, and languages. That was the real foundation of her power.
And this brings us to a really powerful realization for all of us here today. Every word you learn opens a new door. Think about it. When Cleopatra painstakingly learned the Egyptian language, something her royal ancestors arrogantly refused to do, it opened the door to the absolute loyalty of her people. Today, when we learn a new language, master a new skill, or just absorb a new piece of history, we are doing the exact same thing. We are making ourselves stronger and a whole lot more capable of connecting with the world around us.
Which leaves us with this final, vital question. How will you use your knowledge to shape the world? Cleopatra showed us that intelligence is true, timeless power. Education really is the ultimate tool for navigating life's challenges. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.